Hey you guys, welcome back to my channel. Now recently I uploaded a video, Secrets of Playboy, from the viewpoint of the Shannon twins, and I asked you guys, would you guys like for me to keep recapping this docuseries, and most of you said yes, so that's what we're going to do. Today we're going to bring it back to the first episode. I'm going to tell you guys the key players and what the first episode was mainly about. While there's several people that we were introduced to, it was mainly about a woman by the name of Jennifer Saginor. Her daddy was Mark Saginor. He was Hugh Hefner's doctor for 40 plus years, and he was actually by Hugh Hefner's side when Hugh Hefner passed away at the age of 91. And his daughter now, Jennifer Saginor, she is coming out. She is on almost every episode. She may actually be on every episode of Secrets of Playboy. Her experience is very interesting because her experience is a little bit different than most everyone else, because she actually lived in the Playboy mansion. Hugh Hefner was like a father to her, or like an uncle to her. It wasn't where she was like a playmate and she dated him. It was a little bit different. So I have all my notes here, you guys, and I'm going to give you guys a recap of the very first episode. But still, if you haven't watched it, try to watch it. If you can't watch it, then I'll try to give you guys as much information as possible throughout my recaps. So the first episode, I'm going to give you guys a list of everyone that's on the first episode. We have Jennifer Saginor. Like I said, she is the daughter of Mark Saginor, who was Hugh Hefner's doctor. We are introduced to a man by the name of Richard Band. He was Hugh Hefner's friend. He spoke about Hugh Hefner's upbringing. He speaks about how Hugh Hefner got started, the things that Hugh Hefner kind of went through that led him to go from being Hugh to being Hef, because there was an incident that took place in Hugh Hefner's childhood or teenage years where he actually decided, you know what, I'm going to reinvent myself, and that kind of brought him into being the person that he became. Growing up, he was known as Hugh. Normal guy, 9 to 5 is what he probably would have envisioned, but then this incident took place and he reinvented himself, started calling himself Hef, and became who he became. Now, Richard Band doesn't really give any details as to Hugh Hefner being anything but a decent person, at least in the first episode. After that, we are introduced to Sandra Theodore. Sandra Theodore was Hugh Hefner's girlfriend from 1976 to 1981. She was just 19 years old when she was introduced to Hugh Hefner and when she started dating him. And while her story is so interesting, and we're going to hear from her a lot in the first episode, she don't really talk too much about her story just yet, but we do hear from her a little bit. Mickey Garcia, she was a playmate turned head of promotions of Playboy, and when she was a playmate, and even when she was promoted to head of promotions, she actually thought that Hugh Hefner was a great guy. She thought that he was the face of sexual liberation, that everything that was said about him, she believed that. But then she went through this experience where she was raped, and she started seeing this happening a lot within the Playboy world, where the women that worked there, they were abused by these powerful men. And rather than, Hugh Hefner doing anything about it, it was just swept under the rug. And they still had to face their abusers because they were men that were a part of Playboy. They were at the mansion all the time. They were at the clubs all the time, and they still kind of had to wait on them and be around them. So that's when she kind of realized, wait, this is not what Hugh Hefner says that it is. We are just here to do whatever they want. Like, he's just feeding us to them, and if we speak out, it's an issue. So that's when she kind of went from believing what Hugh Hefner wanted everyone to believe about him to seeing the truth. And she stayed on head of promotions because she wanted to try to protect as many women as possible. So like when she would have to send women out to do promotional gigs for Hugh Hefner for the Playboy brand, she would send them, in groups, or she would send bodyguards, or she would do it in a way to try to protect them as much as possible. Also, we're introduced to PJ Maston. PJ Maston was the bunny mom from 1972 to 1982. So she was the bunny mom for 10 years. After that, we are introduced to Lisa Page. Lisa Page was the editorial assistant for a year. Anything Playboy or Hugh Hefner related, she actually would go through it. So like if a book was written about Hugh Hefner or Playboy, she was tasked with getting a hold of it before it came out, going through it, and getting rid of it if it painted Hugh Hefner or Playboy in a bad light. So those are the people that we're introduced to. Also, we're introduced to a guy that worked for the valet and one of the butlers, but I do not remember their names. They don't really give too much in this episode, really. There's a few things that they talk about that I'll kind of go over, but I did not write down their names. Now, in the beginning of this episode, Holly Madison, she starts off by saying everything that the public has heard about Hugh Hefner was what he wanted us to hear, and it was a very calculated misrepresentation of the truth. She also says that I don't think we know what Hugh Hefner's legacy will be just yet, because I don't think the dust has settled. Because, you know, when he passed away back in 2017, when it was announced, all these news anchors and everyone kind of coming out to sing Hugh Hefner's praises. He was face of sexual liberation, equality, that he gave people the chance to do things that other people weren't giving them, that he allowed women to celebrate their beauty, be happy about it, flaunt it, whatever. But after his passing, people started really coming out to say that that's not at all who he was, that he was a sexist, that he was an oppressor, that he was a rapist, that he fed drugs to women, that he demeaned women, that he allowed his friends to do the same thing. So that's why I think she's saying that the dust hasn't even settled yet, because we don't even know half of the truth of what happened behind those doors at the mansion. Now, Jennifer Saginor, like I said, her dad, Mark Saginor, I'm going to give you guys a little bit more information on who Mark Saginor is, because I think it's important to know about who he is so we can really understand his daughter and the role that she played growing up at the mansion. So her dad, Mark Saginor, worked really hard to create a reputation for himself. That's how he made connections. He eventually met Hugh Hefner, with whom he bonded over the fact that they were both once geeks who made it big. From there on, Mark became not only the Playboy's personal doctor, but also his nearest and dearest friend, leading him to have a room at the mansion as well. He actually ended up moving into the mansion, and some people believe, and this is talked about on the first episode as well, his daughter actually talks about this. A lot of people believe that Hugh Hefner and Mark Saginor were actually lovers. Sandra Theodore, who dated Hugh Hefner, she said Mark became Hugh Hefner's best friend. They took things really far. They became more than best friends. Now, Jennifer, she stated, she says, my father and Hef had a spiritual connection that I don't believe any of his wives or girlfriends could ever compete against. They had a physical relationship, and then that sort of turned into something that was a little bit more sinister. Over the years, my father really gave up his family life, his practice, and everything to be with Hugh Hefner. It is my personal belief that the love of Hef's life was my father. Dr. Mark Saginor, also known as Mr. Feelgood because of his alleged willingness to prescribe drugs to those at the Playboy Mansion, was credited for saving Hugh Hefner's life when Hugh Hefner had a stroke in the mid-1980s. Yet nearly 2 decades after that incident, things between Hugh Hefner and Mark Saginor changed, at least in the public's eye, because Mark Saginor was accused of a lot of things. He was accused of abuse, sexual abuse of different girls at the mansion. When that situation came about, Mark Saginor's license was actually suspended for 5 years. This was back in 2008. The Medical Board of California stated that he committed acts of sexual misconduct and sexual exploitation of a patient, possessed and used illegal drugs, and committed acts of repeated negligence. And they also added that he failed to maintain adequate and accurate medical records in the care and treatment of a patient. According to Jennifer, in this A&E series, Mark and Hugh Hefner parted ways as far as the public was concerned. So when all this came out about Mark, that he was, just kind of giving drugs to all these women to sexually abuse them, that he wasn't keeping the proper records, and his license was suspended. When all that happened, Hugh Hefner appeared to cut his relationship with Mark off, but that really wasn't the case. She said they continued their bond in private. Hef always wanted to be one step removed from every situation so that nothing would ever come back as a direct negative reflection on him. She added that although her father felt like the fall guy, that Hugh Hefner and Mark Saginor would still talk on the phone all of the time. The two started to spend time together again in person in 2010. And the reason for that was because all the assault charges against the doctor were eventually dropped. No legal action was taken. So basically, once he was kind of cleared of this and nothing ever came of it, Hugh Hefner and Mark Saginor, they kind of resumed their friendship, to which Jennifer Saginor, Mark's daughter, as well as Sandra Theodore, who dated Hugh Hefner, both say that they feel like the two were actually in love and they had this spiritual connection. And that's why he was like one of the only ones that was by Hugh Hefner's side this entire time. So I think that's important for you guys to kind of understand Mark Saginor, so we can kind of go into talking about Jennifer Saginor, his daughter. Now, like she said, he gave up his family life and everything because he was married, children, but once he started hanging out with Hugh Hefner and was by his side all the time, he and his wife started having problems, to which they separated, ended up divorced, and he moved into the mansion. Jennifer said that her first time visiting the mansion, she was just 6 years old, you guys. 6 years old the first time that she visited the mansion, and then 11 years old when she moved in with her father at the mansion. Now, after she got out of college, she actually wrote a book. The name of her book is called Playground, A Childhood Lost Inside the Playboy Mansion. On this series, she talks about it took her a long time to unravel how she feels about what she experienced while growing up at the mansion. But she says when she wrote this book, she still felt a little sense of loyalty to Hugh Hefner. And considering that her dad was still really good friends with him, she wanted to paint him in the best possible light possible, even though, like, at that time, she had already come to learn that Hugh Hefner was not what he seemed. Her dad was still really good friends with him, and she felt this sense of loyalty. She lived there. She grew up there. So in her book, she did not want to paint Hugh Hefner out to be a bad person. She talked about how after she moved in, how Dorothy Stratton, who was a playmate, how Dorothy Stratton and some of the other playmates took care of her while she was growing up. Mind you, her mother was not there. She lived there with her dad, who was always busy hanging out with Hugh Hefner, playing backgammon with him, you know, whatever the case may be, while this little 11-year-old girl was just kind of left to roam around. So she was actually taken care of by a lot of the women. Specifically, she names Dorothy Stratton. She said her favorite time of year living at the mansion was Christmas. She said Hugh Hefner was like an uncle or a second dad to her. She remembers the gifts that he would get her for Christmas. It was always very extravagant. He was always like kind of showering her like she was one of his kids as well. She remembers spending a lot of time in the game room. And she says Hugh Hefner would come in there and she would sit on his lap and they would play games and he would put his thumb on her thumb and they would kind of play together. So she had this father-daughter relationship, or you know, uncle-niece type relationship with Hugh Hefner. Back then, she said that she saw Hugh Hefner as, you know, nice, humble, generous, just an all-around good person. That was when she was still too little to really recognize what was going on around her, though. So growing up, you know, 11 years old, first time going, 6 years old. 11 years old, she moves in. Growing up, she really had this idea that it was like just a very fun place to be. And Hugh Hefner was like a very great guy, just very generous and, you know, very accepting of everyone, because this was in a time where certain people were not allowed to do certain things. But Hugh Hefner allowed that. He welcomed that. Now, according to her and several of the other people that speak out against him, this is all just like for his image, to make him look a certain way when really he is not that way. So she talks about how she loved growing up there at first, but she starts talking about these experiences that happened that led her to realize that this was all an illusion. So 11 years old, she moves in. They're having all these parties there downstairs. When she's supposed to be upstairs asleep, they're having these parties downstairs. So as she started getting a little bit older, you know, like 12 years old, she hears all this music going on downstairs. So she decides to start going down there to take a peek. She's like hanging over the banister, looking down, seeing all these people dressed very sexualized, which was really nothing new to her because, you know, when she would be out by the pool every day, same thing was going on. So she's seeing, you know, all of this going on late at night when she's supposed to be sleeping. All these parties are going on. She started sneaking downstairs. She said that's when she kind of realized, like, oh my gosh, I can't wait till I can get older and I can be a part of this. Like, I want to be a part of this. I want to be down there hanging out with everybody. And, you know, this was her family, Hugh Hefner and her dad. They're all down there hanging out with all these very famous people. So she looked forward to when she would grow up and she would be able to hang out with them. Now, at like 14 years old, they actually started letting her participate in these activities, you know, be there for the parties. Another thing that they would do, this was when she started noticing the hypocrisy with Hugh Hefner, with Playboy, is they actually would show her pictures of the girls that were in the running for like Playmate of the Year or just to be in the magazine. They would show her pictures. It would be Jennifer and all these men sitting around a table, and they would show her pictures and they would ask her, what do you think this girl needs to be beautiful or more beautiful? What can she change about her body? Do you think she needs a nose job? Do you think she needs a chin implant? Do you think she needs a boob job? Do you think she needs to lose weight? Like, what do you think this person needs? So she actually started critiquing these women to Hugh Hefner and these men that worked for Playboy and telling them, well, I think she needs this. I think she needs that. Maybe she should do that. And she said that's when she really started realizing the hypocrisy in Playboy, because Playboy at the time, they were being attacked by feminists. Feminists were attacking Hef, they were attacking Playboy. They were saying that Hugh Hefner and Playboy, that they were objectifying these women. And she started realizing that it was not about women empowerment at all, like Playboy claimed, that these men really were oppressing these women, that these men really were treating these women just kind of like objects. Like, oh, what does this woman need to change so she could be more entertaining to us, so she could be more beautiful to me? You know, what do you think she should change? So we can put her in her magazine and maybe it'll do a little bit better because she looks a little bit better. What do you think? You know, so that's when she started realizing that what these feminists were saying was maybe true. She said because of this, because of the way she would rate these women and the way she knew that Hugh Hefner and the Playboy company, the way they looked at women, that she actually started having plastic surgery herself at just 15 years old. 15 years old, she started changing things about her body because she wanted to make sure she appeared as beautiful as all of these women around her. Now, also at 15 years old, she fell in love with one of Hugh Hefner's girlfriends. Now, at this time, like I said, she had already been welcomed in to do everything that the adults was doing around there, all of the parties. She was there. She was hanging out with everyone, right? So at 15 years old, Hugh Hefner, he had a couple of girlfriends at that time, and she actually started messing around with one of the girlfriends, and she fell in love with one of the girlfriends. She said they had a 2-year relationship, to which she really thought like she was full-blown in love with one of the girlfriends. Now, one of the butlers detailed a night that he remembered to where Jennifer was in her room and she rang down for room service for like wine and stuff. And when he came up to deliver the wine, Jennifer was in bed with Hugh Hefner's girlfriend. And as he was leaving, the girlfriend kind of told him like, hey, don't say anything or something like that. Like, don't repeat this, but you don't have to be scared of what you've seen, but just don't repeat it, right? So even the butler can like back up the story that Jennifer Saginor at 15 years old was in a relationship with a full-blown adult female that was dating Hugh Hefner. Now, Jennifer said that she was actually worried what would happen if Hugh Hefner found out. How was he going to feel about it? Because to her, that's like her dad, that's like her uncle. Well, she says about 2 years into this affair with the girlfriend that she was actually called by the girlfriend. The girlfriend was in Hugh Hefner's suite, and she called Jennifer downstairs and said, hey, you need to come upstairs. Hugh Hefner wants to meet with both of us. She said she kind of figured out that he had figured out about the relationship and that he was going to kind of call her out and confront her about this relationship. So one of the playmates actually walked down to Jennifer's room and was like, I'm going to walk you up there, bring you to Hugh Hefner. And Jennifer called this girl Kendall, the girl that she was having a relationship with, but this is not her real name. Her real name is not Kendall. So if you try to look up Hugh Hefner's girlfriend Kendall, you're not going to find her. This is a fake name. So anyways, Jennifer says that when she got to Hugh Hefner's room, that the playmate actually told her, listen, anything you don't want to do, don't do it. Do not feel forced to do anything in that room. And Jennifer said she was confused because while she thought that Hugh Hefner might confront her, she did not think that he would try to force her to do anything. So she walks in because she says, really, she wanted to see Kendall anyways. Like, even if it meant she had to go in there and be confronted by Hugh Hefner, she would do that just so she could see Kendall. So she goes inside and they're just sitting there on the bed. She says Hugh Hefner offers her a drink. And after a few minutes, that Kendall starts crying. That Kendall gets up, takes off to the bathroom, and she's crying. And Hugh Hefner says, well, great, she's crying, so now we're not going to be able to do anything. She says she was very confused because she did not have that type of relationship with Hugh Hefner. He was literally like family. And she said she told him, she said, my dad's right down the hallway. And he said, it doesn't matter. We're all family here. He's not going to care. To which makes me wonder, did Hugh Hefner get permission from Mark Saginor? Like, did he say, like, hey, Jennifer's getting up there in age. You know, what do you think if I bring her into the bedroom? Was Mark like, oh, yeah, that's fine. We're all family. Not a big deal. For Hugh Hefner to be so sure of himself when answering Jennifer, like, oh, it's fine. Yeah, he's right down the hall, but we're all family. Not a big deal. Like, I really feel Mark must have kind of given his permission. Now, during this particular episode, she does not detail where anything, I think she talks about a kiss happening, but other than that, nothing else happening between her and Hugh Hefner. But just the pure and simple fact that it seems like he brought her into that room looking to have a sexual relationship with her and Kendall, you know, the two of them together, tells me all that I need to know. Like, she was just 15 years old. Now, after that, she went off to college. It was after college that she wrote this book. When Hugh Hefner first found out that she had written this book, he reached out to her and he was like, hey, I'm so proud of you. I heard you've written a book about your experience living here at the mansion. I would like to get a copy. And she said, sure. You know, she said that even though she had already seen the hypocrisy, she had already kind of figured out that he was not the type of person that he said that he was, she said that she still, feeling a sense of loyalty, painted him in as positive light as possible. So she wasn't really scared about giving him the book, but she had detailed her relationship with Kendall. She had actually written about that relationship. So she sends him a copy of the book. He also asked her to fax over a list of all of her upcoming interviews for the book tour. So she was going on this book tour where she was going to be sitting down with television stations to talk about this book, to promote this book. So he said, listen, send me a copy of the book and send me the list of everywhere you're going to be going to promote the book. And she was like, yeah, sure, no problem. Another thing that he asked her, he said, in your book, please do not write that I knew about your affair with Kendall. If you're going to detail the affair, just make sure that it's no mention that I knew about it. Of course, he would not want her to mention that because that would mean that Hugh Hefner was okay with his girlfriend dating a 15-year-old, a minor. So he wanted to make sure that she did not put that in there. She agreed to that. She's like, yeah, okay, sure, not a problem. Now, whether or not she'd already put that in there and she had to edit it, I don't know. But she just said that she agreed to that. So she sends him a copy of the book. She sends him a list of all the places that she's going to be going to promote this book. She said literally in the days following, one by one, those interviews were canceled. Each station just started canceling the interviews. So she was not even able to promote the book the way that she had planned. And when they asked her, you know, what do you think happened? Who do you think was behind this? She said she knew who was behind it. She said it was Hugh Hefner, and she said she knew it was him. He was the only one that really knew all of the places that she was going to be going, and she said that she felt like he did this because he wanted to stay in control. He wanted to make sure there was not going to be anything out there that he did not approve of 100%. Anything that would paint him in a bad light, he did not want that out there. So every one of those interviews were canceled. And she said one of the things that Hugh Hefner always kind of branded himself to be about was freedom of speech. But many times he and his team would do things like this. If something was coming out negative about him or the company, they would shut it down. They would make sure there was no way for certain things to get out. Now, Mickey Garcia, she also wrote a book as well, trying to expose Hugh Hefner and the mansion and the things that was going on within the company. This was after she broke free from the company because she was head of promotions. After that, she wrote this book. She actually testified in front of Congress, giving details as to what was going on. And she said during that time, when she was speaking before Congress, when she was finishing up her book, that she actually hired bodyguards because she was very afraid. Before hiring bodyguards, she was actually approached and they tried to buy her off. They tried to buy her silence. They offered her a lot of money to not go through with speaking out publicly and not putting the book out, but she declined. And she said she was going to do whatever she could to out Hugh Hefner and who he really was. Now, one important thing that Hugh Hefner's valet speaks about is he speaks about how there were cameras all over the mansion. They were in the bedrooms, they were in the bathrooms, they were everywhere. And that's why Hugh Hefner would invite everyone to these parties, celebrities, politicians. He had everybody on film doing something wrong. He had politicians, he had people that worked for LAPD, he had everyone on camera doing something wrong. So when someone tried to turn him in, he could contact the LAPD and say, I have this, so I need your help. And it would get rid of everything. That's how Hugh Hefner was able to do things, and things were happening at the mansion, and nobody ever really turned him in because he was very powerful. He had, you know, blackmail on pretty much everyone. So the valet, Mickey Garcia, as well as Jennifer Saginor, they all talk about these things, how he had blackmail on everyone. So that's why no one would speak out about him. Also, he had members of the LAPD that worked at the mansion pulling security. So that's another way he had the LAPD in his back pocket. So all these celebrities, politicians, when they would come there, they would be filmed doing things, inappropriate things they were not supposed to be doing, and that's just kind of how he got away with everything. So that's kind of part 1, episode 1 of Secrets of Playboy. Like I said, it's on A&E. I'll do a recap of the second episode as well. The main person in this episode was Jennifer Saginor. Like I said, her dad was Mark Saginor. He was Hugh Hefner's doctor for 40 plus years by his side when he passed away. Also key players, Mickey Garcia, PJ, Sandra. These were all people that was very involved with Hugh Hefner's life, who has a lot of details of the things that went on that nobody knew about. So you guys leave me your thoughts in the comment section below. I will be doing a recap to the second episode. Let me know what you think of the first episode. And yeah, if you haven't subscribed to the channel yet, please make sure you do that right now. Give this video a thumbs up. And until next time, I'll see you guys later. Goodbye, everyone.